The sun hung low, a molten coin sinking into the dust-choked throat of the town. Heat waves shimmered off the dry boards of the auction block, where a single figure stood, still as a fence post, yet heavier than any eyes could bear to hold. Evelyn Rose Monroe, her hands folded neatly at her waist. Fingers laced as if in prayer, though not a soul in that square would call her a blessing. Silas Boone's voice cracked through the stillness, loud and sharp like a hammer on cold steel. Barren, broke, no dowry. Each word struck her body but never moved her bones. The crowd flinched harder than she did. Women busied themselves with parasols and handkerchiefs. Men squinted at boots or sky. Anywhere but her. A girl no one wanted was harder to look at than a dead mule on a Sunday. The wooden platform beneath her feet groaned, old and unkind. And in that silence, filled with the sound of people pretending she wasn't there, Evelyn stood taller, as if the shame no longer had room to seep into her bones. She'd learned that from years of being passed over, dismissed, talked around. But today felt different. Today, she was not invisible. Today, she was on display. She's a hard worker. I'll give her that, Boone muttered, less of the crowd than to himself, as if apologizing for product. Ain't no crime being plain. The words sagged in the air, unloved. Murmurs swept through the crowd like a sour wind. No good for heirs, someone whispered. She'd sour the milk, another sneered. They didn't spit at her feet. No, that would take effort. Indifference cuts cleaner than cruelty. Near the edge of the square, leaning against the rail with arms folded like a man bracing for an old pain, Jesse Callahan watched. The sun cast a shadow beneath his hat brim, hiding the soft ache in his eyes. He wasn't looking at Evelyn like the rest. He was seeing her, not the plain dress, not the flat mouth that didn't smile, but the way she stood as if she'd already survived what they feared most, being left behind. His hands, rough from years of fencing and sorrow, dug into his pockets. His mind had no words for why his boots stepped forward, but his heart had long ago stopped needing reasons. The silver coin left his fingers with quiet clink, a sound so small it cracked the air wider than Boone's bark. 1 silver. From Callahan, Boone announced, voice pinched with disbelief. It echoed as if the wind itself wasn't sure it heard right. The crowd shifted. Some faces turned toward Jesse, their looks half pity, half confusion. A man buying a woman no one wanted was worse than the woman herself. Foolishness can't be forgiven like ugliness can. But Jesse didn't look at them. He only watched Evelyn. Evelyn, who hadn't flinched. She'd been waiting for silence, not a savior. Yet when she heard that coin, she lowered her gaze, not in defeat, but in something deeper. Shame, yes, but also mercy. A mercy that burned warmer than any cruelty she'd endured. She didn't know this man. She didn't need to. The weight in her chest had sat for years. Heavy, familiar, sour, shifted just an inch. Boone gestured lazily. She's yours, Callahan. Take her off my block. Jesse moved up the steps with a rancher's gait, unhurried, steady, like a man who knew storms come slow before they break. He offered a hand. It wasn't a gallant gesture. It was rough, work-worn, callous with living. Evelyn looked at it like it might vanish. Then her fingers slid into his, dry against dry. No words, no soft smiles. Just a feel of 2 exiles whose scars fit in the same places. When her boots hit the dirt, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Not applause, not congratulations. Just the sound of folks confirming their judgment. The fool and the unwanted. Let them go. Their wagon wasn't fancy. No top cover, no shine. It waited like an old dog, reliable and plain. Jesse helped her into it with a hand on her elbow. No more, no less. Evelyn settled on the bench seat, her gaze fixed ahead, though she felt the heat of 100 eyes on her back. Jesse took the reins. His fingers didn't brush hers, but the space between them hummed with things unsaid. As the wagon rolled away, wheels crunching the brittle earth, the town didn't cheer, didn't wave. They watched, they judged, but none dared raise a hand to stop them. The wind picked up, curling dust behind them in soft, swirling threads, as if the world was sewing their story, stitch by humble stitch, while the crowd stood still. In the leaving, Evelyn thought, asterisk, maybe mercy isn't loud. Maybe it rides away in a creaky wagon, with no witnesses but the wind, asterisk. And Jesse, glancing at her once, thought, a man doesn't know the weight he's been carrying till someone else shares it. Neither smiled, but both breathed easier. Morning came slow on the Callahan ranch, seeping through the mist like a secret not yet ready to be told. Evelyn stood barefoot in the yard, the dirt cool beneath her feet, a chipped enamel basin clutched against her hip. The world felt hushed but not empty. Somewhere near the barn, Jesse's hammer knocked a steady rhythm, and Emmett's small voice, quiet but present, floated after it. They didn't see her watching. She wondered if they even knew how loud their silence was. She wasn't asked to tend the laundry. No one had spoken a list of chores. But the clothesline sagged tired in the corner of the yard, and a man's shirt, tore at the elbow, weighted like a wound no one had the hands to mend. So she took up needle and thread, not as a wife, not as a servant, but as a woman aching to belong to something. Each stitch was a soft, invisible plea. Let me stay. The barn got swept twice. The second time not out of need, but to feel the rhythm of a broom handle steadying her nerves. She folded Jesse's worn coat, left it hanging by the door. None of these things were thanked, but none were undone. Jesse noticed. Of course, he did, but noticing and allowing are not the same thing. His nods were brief acknowledgments, nothing more. His words, when they came, were rationed like winter feed. He worked longer hours now, not out of necessity, but as if building fences and mending gates could shore up the distance between her and the memory of the woman who used to fill this house. Evelyn felt that ghost. The house wore her absence like a shroud. Every quiet creak, every half-set table, whisper a woman who once sang while she cooked. Jesse's kindness was not absent. It was buried, like an axe in a tree stump, too long untouched to pull free. It wasn't Jesse who shifted first. It was Emmett. At 8, the boy knew how to watch with a sharpness beyond his years. He studied Evelyn from doorways, shadowed her path across the yard, eyes darting away when she looked back. He never spoke to her. Not once. But then she left a small offering. She had found a scrap of wood near the porch, and in the soft glow of lamplight, she whittled it into the rough shape of a horse. It wasn't fine work. She'd never been taught, but it had 4 legs and a strong neck, and it looked ready to run if the wind just dared. She placed it beside Emmett's bed, said nothing, didn't wait to be found. The next morning, the horse was in his pocket. When she passed him by, Emmett looked up. His mouth didn't smile, but his eyes softened. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to, but not all eyes softened. Ruthie Jameson watched Evelyn each morning from the weather-beaten porch across the dirt path. Ruthie had been born in that rocker, or so folks joked, and her tongue was sharper than Boone's auction hammer. As Evelyn passed with her wash, Ruthie leaned forward, lips tight around the words folks didn't bother hiding. Bought, but never wanted. Not loud, but Evelyn heard. She didn't flinch. Her chin tilted up just so, not in defiance, just survival. That same stillness she'd carried on the auction block followed her now. Each step on Callahan soil, a quiet refusal to be erased. That evening, the sun bled red into the hills. The ranch house, for all its emptiness, offered the 3 of them a table, a loaf of bread, and a pot of stew. They sat, Jesse, Emmett, Evelyn, in a triangle of unspoken things. The meal was a choreography of small gestures. Jesse passed the salt. Evelyn refilled a cup before it emptied. Emmett slid the butter toward her with his palm, eyes avoiding hers. No words. But the clatter of spoons against bowls didn't feel so lonely. It wasn't warmth. Not yet. But it wasn't cold, either. Outside, the sky stitched clouds together like a seamstress with trembling hands. The storm came not with a roar, but with a creeping hush. Raindrops began tapping the roof as if asking for permission. When the leak started, it was no surprise. The old roof had been protesting for years. Jesse grabbed a pail. Evelyn fetched rags. Emmett, eager, stood on a chair to press his small hands against the drip. It should have been frustration. Another thing to fix. Another thing wrong. But as they worked, shoulders brushing, Fingers fumbling over damp wood, a laugh escaped Evelyn. A small, breathy thing, surprised by itself. Jessie looked at her, startled, as if hearing music after years of drought. Then Emmett giggled too, high and sharp, the sound of boyhood rediscovered. Jessie shook his head, muttering about a damn leaky roof. But the corner of his mouth betrayed him. For a fleeting moment, they weren't the widower, the orphan, and the woman nobody wanted. They were just a man, a woman, and a boy, patching a roof in the rain, together. An ember sparked. It wasn't enough to warm a house yet, but it was enough to keep. Sunday morning rolled over plains with the soft toll of church bells, but the Callahan wagon stayed rooted to its place. The town rolled on without them, boots crunching gravel, bonnets dipping low as folks passed by. Evelyn stood at the fence line, her back straight, chin tilted just high enough to meet the stairs with something steadier than pride. Presence. Her hands rested on the splintered rail, fingers loose, though her pulse beat like a hammer. Silas Boone sauntered by, spurs singing with each lazy step. He tipped his hat, but his grin cut sharper than any blade. "Still reckon you got a good deal, Callahan?" The words were tossed over his shoulder, aimed not to wound, but to echo, louder than bells, louder than silence. Jessie didn't bite. His hat brim stayed low, but his stillness spoke louder than Boone's smirk. Some battles aren't fought in words. Some are just endured until the air stops burning. Later that week, the town found smaller ways to bruise. At the general store, while Jessie hefted a sack of feed onto his shoulder, the whispers gathered like crows. "Charity case," someone muttered. "Bought himself a maid, not a wife." The words stung, not for their cruelty, but for their smallness. Jessie's hand clenched tighter around the sack, knuckles white, but his jaw stayed shut. His silence was not weakness. It was patience, waiting for a truer moment. Evelyn had no sermons to give, no sharp tongue to cut back. But when dusk settled that evening, she found her own way to speak. From a box she kept tucked beneath the bed, she pulled out curtains, nothing fancy, just soft, simple fabric with a blue so pale it almost wasn't there. She stood on a stool, thumbed the nails into the wood herself, and watched as the fabric billowed in the open window. It was a quiet defiance, a banner, a statement no one but the walls would hear. Asterisk, I live here. This is my home. Asterisk. That night, as Evelyn smoothed the bed sheets, Emmett stood at the doorway, small fingers clutching the wooden horse she carved. His voice was barely a whisper, but it held the weight of a new world. "Ma, can you tell me a story?" The word floated in the air, fragile, as if it might break apart if anyone dared breathe too loud. Evelyn froze. Jessie, from the next room, did too. The boy hadn't been told to say it. No one had asked it of him. But there it was. Evelyn knelt, gathering Emmett into her arms, her breath catching on a knot in her throat. She didn't correct him. Didn't need to. The days that followed, Jessie watched her more, watched how her hands stitched up their lives in small, careful ways. She mended the barn roof when a storm peeled it back, alone, without asking. Balanced on that ladder with the wind tugging at her skirt, Evelyn wasn't a burden. She was the one holding the place together, one nail, one breath at a time. Jessie realized then, it wasn't that she filled the space his wife left behind. It was that she'd made her own. The next Sunday came. The bells rang again, their song unchanged. But Jessie's boots hit the dirt with new weight. He didn't speak when he found Evelyn by the porch steps. He just reached for her hand. Not a lover's grip, not a hero's claim, just a raw, honest hold of a man standing beside a woman who had rebuilt his life in silence. Evelyn's breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Their wagon rolled into town slow and sure. The path to the church stretched ahead, lined with faces that didn't cheer, didn't welcome. But something shifted. The murmurs quieted. The townsfolk stepped aside. No one smiled, but no one blocked their path. And that was enough. The world doesn't always bow with applause. Sometimes it shifts just enough to let you through. Jessie didn't need to explain himself. Evelyn didn't need to prove her worth. Their presence said it all. They took a seat in the back pew, not the place of honor, but the place of peace. Years later, Folks would tell the story of the Callahan Ranch, not for the size of its herd or the gold in its coffers, but for the warmth that seemed to live inside its walls. They'd say Jesse Callahan bought a woman no one wanted, but she built him a home no gold could ever buy. And if you, someday, find yourself standing alone while the world turns its face away, remember this. Sometimes all it takes is one hand reaching for yours, one soul brave enough to stand beside you in the quiet. And when they do, you'll find the world hushes its noise, not because you fought for it, but because you simply stood together